Welcome back, gang. The Arcanist is finally on the public test server, and we have been parsing, figuring out the builds, running through the new trial, running through Vateshran Arena, and I wanted to give you a sneak peek of what this is going to be like. Keep in mind, this information is subject to change. There'll be important links in the description below because we already have builds and templates figured out for you when this launches June 5th on PC. And what I will say in a PvE context is this thing absolutely melts health bars, but the gameplay is quite different, and I'm here to explain. So let's jump into game, show you the Arcanist live, and at the end of this, we'll show you some gameplay of how it looks and functions doing Vateshran Hollow on the very last boss, which I was able to trifecta. This thing melts health bars, and you're gonna wanna know how it works. Here's how. Welcome. This is the Arcanist skill lines and how you throw the build together. So what I'm going to show you today is my PvE solo build. I was used to solo Vateshran Hollow's trifecta in 24 minutes using 2 bars. This is going to kind of walk you through the class. One, what you need to be aware of with this class, especially playing solo in PvE, is it does not have a whole lot of built-in healing. In fact, your main ability, which we're going to go over in detail, Exhausting Fake Harbor, doesn't heal you. Doesn't have damage reduction, and it's a 4.5 second or higher channel. So you gotta be very, very aware of this, and it's not in its current form very PvE solo friendly. Groups, you don't really notice it. You have to throw on pay order mythic to make it really, really effective. So this is gonna be your long lasting channel. This is what the entire class centers on, okay? Building up cruxes. So you're gonna use your first ability in the skill line to build up a crux. I have this morph here, which is more of the single target focus. When I say crux, this is what it looks like. You use this ability, and you see you have that green little effect on you. Just like that. That builds up a crux, which a maximum of 3. 1, 2, 3. See, I have 3 of them floating around. You see the number 1 and 2 bar on my bar are kind of lit up. That means you have the max crux, and you can consume those abilities to do more damage, more duration, and so on and so forth. This is how the Arcanist works, okay? So the very first thing you're going to want to do from a DPS perspective is to use a main spamble, build up these cruxes, and then debuff the enemy with Tentacular Dread. So after you consume 3 cruxes with this, you're going to deal 5% increased damage to enemies drenched in this abyssal ink. Enemies are also immobilized and marked with this debuff for 20 seconds. Damage to foes drenched in abyssal ink is increased by 2%, and immobilization is increased by 1% per crux spent. So you want to consume all 3 cruxes and use this ability to really ramp up your damage. The key thing about this ability is 0.3 seconds, and it's very long, 15 by 5, and it's magic based. So this is kind of where your magic dump if you're using a stand build. So how it would work is simply like this. And you can see that debuff at the top of the screen, 20 seconds, it's going to increase your damage. Now from there is what you do is you build up the cruxes again to hit whatever morph that you pick of Exhausting Fake Harbor. Fake Harbor is your massive AoE channel. When you can actually use it, you have to aim the thing. So if most people are sitting there looking at the ground, you're not gonna take advantage of this skill. Also, you can move with it. Your kind of movements is not necessarily super impaired, but you will have to be a little bit slower. And the longer, the more cruxes you have, the more powerful this beam becomes. So you can use it with or without crux. So if you're tracking so far, you're gonna light attack weave, build up your stacks, hit them with Tentacular Dread. Build it up all over again, and then hit them with Fake Harbor. And this is awesome in group PvE, specifically trial. We ran through the new trial today. Didn't want to show you that in case you didn't want a spoiler, but it's massive cleave. And that's where this really comes into great play here is not only does your main spamble have range, it has a cleave morph option as well. This has an AoE massive damage main spamble or channel, if you will. And then this here, 15 by 5 meters. Everything you do has built-in AoE and great single target. It's very, very good in content, especially if you have a healer. So that's kind of the premise here that we have. Now, this one here, Recuperative Tradices, there's 2 different morphs. This is kind of the Resource Sustain one. And what this does is kind of pulses with power every 5 seconds. So these pulses enhance your class abilities. This is something that you just want to maintain and keep up. Massive magic cost, but really cool thing here. Major brutality and major sorcery, weapon, and spell damage, regardless of what bar you put it on. So you can back bar this. Now, why don't I have it back barred? You want to take a look at these passives. Link in the description below for all the passives on here. But usually if you front bar something, you're going to get more of a benefit than keeping on your back bar, your class specific items here. So when you gain or spend a crux, increase your crit damage and crit healing by 12% for 7 seconds. It really incentivizes you to do that. When you are restored magic or stam, increasing your weapon or spell damage. As you can see, the recuperative one really helps and plays into that. When you have a Herald's Home ability slotted, increase damage dealt by status effects by 15%. Super important, more on that later. And then you get to physical and spell penetration. By slotting a Herald of his Home ability. This is very important for medium armor users. Why? Because medium armor users do not get a passive that increases penetration. Light armors do on concentration. So for a medium armor user, it's really important to load up those abilities on your front bar because you're lacking your armor to give you that penetration stat. More pen equals more damage, around 18,200 in veteran content specifically. Okay, so you're kind of tracking how this DPS thing works. Now let's go to this ability here, Rune of Displacement. This is kind of like a, I don't know, a good AoE damage over time. It also does an explosion, kind of sucks in some way dark convergence-ish. And this is kind of like your main damage over time with the class, is this guy here. So duration's 18 seconds. You look at the tooltip unbuff, 1791. That's very similar in tooltip to entropy. Entropy is about 20,000, but this has a little bit extra explosion with it. Some frost damage to enemies in 7 meters. So you can activate a synergy, and that's nice for group play. So this is kind of like your AoE damage skill you put on your back bar. That way you at least have one of the Herald's Home abilities on the bar at all time because you don't want that status effect passive. Absolutely incredible to fall off. Speaking of status effect passive, this class does very, very well as a true hybrid. One of the reasons why is a lot of your skills cost determined by max resource. So you can essentially stack whatever resource, magic or stamina, but your off stat is going to be very, very valuable. It was really hard for me to resource sustain as a pure stamina build with dual wield on the front and then 2H on the back, like most people are playing in the Elder Scrolls Online right now. So the way I did it was put Instruction Staff on the back. Part of the reason why is taking advantage of this elemental status effect. It's just enormous. No one has this in the Elder Scrolls Online. And then the biggest ability to pair with it is Elemental Susceptibility. Gives you Major Breach. It's absolutely free. 35-meter range, and wait for it, burning status effect, shield, and concussed. You notice a massive damage increase with this, and when you're playing solo, no one provides Major Breach for you anyways. This is why the class is incredibly strong solo with the back bar fire staff to take advantage of elemental susceptibility, also very useful in PvP. So I paired out that right there, and then I put Unstable Wall of Fire. Now, another thing you're going to want to get access to is some form of your buff here, your crit damage buff, Minor Force. So you have Barb Trap if you play in melee range, or Channel Acceleration from Psijic Order, both kind of a pain to get a hold of, but that's kind of how the build is shaking out. Major Breach solo with a lot of status effects. You need some aspect of Minor Force on your front or your back bar. You have a damage over time, Unstable Wall, Stampede, or you can use Deadly Cloak and have back bar dual wield, and then some type of heal or shield. Not using light armor, so I'm gonna go with Resolving Figure, and then the ultimate Shooting Star. Why am I not using the class ultimate? Well, if you go to the class damage dealing ultimate, they're not really that good. They're 200 alt cost, and the damage is channeled very quickly. You actually have to follow a target with one morph, and the other one doesn't necessarily follow a target. But the tooltip on them is not very powerful. And Shooting Star, pound for pound, is just a better ultimate in its current state. Same with front barring Flawless Dawnbreaker. You can get a little more pen front bar on the other one, but really the ultimates are kind of lackluster in their current form. Something that did help me out for solo play is actually Defensive Ultimate here. This big, huge damage shield for 200 when I was doing Vateshran. I ran into a tough fight, so I just put on my back bar real quick, popped it, and it saved me. So you have really nice defensive ulti, and this line here is for the tank line, and then this is for the healing line, which I'll get to in a little bit. And so this is kind of how your bar shapes out, whether you're magic or stamina. You have a couple different morph choices, and just realize that some of the critical abilities, like a Fate Carver, will determine the cost by what your max resource is, your max attribute. Tentacular Dread, that's going to be magic. Same thing with your main spamble. This actually plays very, very well with magic. Another reason why is the range. The main spamble is 22 meters, not 28, but also not 7. So you can actually choose and use a staff. It might lower your damage slightly, but you don't have to eat all those mechanics of playing melee. And this is why it's really good to play the class. You can go dual wield, you can go 2H, you can go a bow, you can go a fire staff, and pick your range or what works best for you along with the attribute choices. And then we get to this ability here, Whirling Blades. As a stamina user, I kind of use this a little bit. In fact, it wasn't that useful because most of the time you're sitting there using your beam over using spin to win. It does hit in a radius and it does have an execute component, but to be honest, most of the time I just actually use Deadly Cloak instead. So I can precast this along with recuperative treatises and then go into combat with those things both running. So that's kind of a flex spot. On magic builds, what I used here was Inner Light. I just pumped up my max magic and kept the build much simpler. That worked very good for me. So again, this is kind of how a DPS build is shaking out. You can obviously change it, but let me go over a couple other skills that are really important. From a tank skill line, there's some really important and juicy skills right away. So when this comes out to level this class, it's going to be hard to level and you don't actually have a whole lot of healing. So the very first skill in the skill line, I was looking for a heal because the Necromancer has one. You can get some decent heal with the Warden, but this Runic Embrace actually heals yourself. Doesn't hit for very hard, but it hits for something. So if you're like scrambling to find something that does damage and heals yourself, no, it's not Puncturing Sweeps from the Templar, no, it's not Hungry Scythe from the Necro, but it is the very first skill in the skill line, and actually it's in the tank line, believe it or not, so that's really important. Now, there is a built-in shield component as well, so that's kind of nice because normally how the shields work is you have to use light armor. There's one specific Undaunted shield, but you do have ability to have shield in your class kit here with the second ability in the tank skill line. Now, here's your armor buff. This is more so for tanks and PvP, but this buff here particularly is absolutely amazing. One morph gives you block mitigation, fantastic for tanks. Another morph, very, very sneaky, awesome one here. Crux Weaver Armor. Increases the duration and when damage creates a crux. So you get Major Resolve, your armor buff, making you a lot more tanky. But it constantly builds cruxes for you without the need to use global cooldowns on your main spammable. This, in fact, is amazing in PvP because you're constantly getting hit with stuff and you're building cruxes passively, allowing you to do beams more. I didn't personally use this in PvE, but in PvP, fantastic ability. Remember that the healing is going to be rough unless they change something from the PTS the way we're currently doing this. This is a skill I would highly recommend for PvE. The people that do not have Pale Order or a competent pocket healer is this skill here. Rune Guard of Freedom. The other morph is actually better for PvE. What this does is like an oh crap panic button. You put it on and it reduces damage, giving you minor resolve and minor protection. When you drop below 50%, it gives you a burst heal. This morph in particular gives you CC immunity, which is great for PvP. But it's kind of like an oh crap button if you get chunked in PvE or PvP, and allows you to get bang popped up so you can get to your back bar, kind of react, put a shield or put a heal on. So when I didn't have Pale Order, I had to take off at a damage ability and put this on in PvE. Absolutely a fantastic ability. Do not sleep on it. This skill here, Rune of Eldritch Insight, is one of the best stuns in the game. And then this is what I use in PvP, Rune of Colorless Pool. It gives minor brittle, minor vulnerability for 14 seconds, and it's stunned. It's a paralyze, and it's 15 meters long. It's super long in length. Absolutely fantastic stun crowd control. Yes, you could hypothetically use it in PvE to debuff a target because it does last quite a long time, which is fantastic, but really it's a great control mechanism in PvP. So just keep aware of that. Those two debuffs are absolutely fantastic, great for tanks. Moving along to the heal line, and something you're going to want to be aware of. This class burst heal is a bit deceptive. So this first skill is kind of like your burst heal in the skill line. I like this one here, Evolving Rune Mend. It looks deceptive on the tooltip. When I first started playing this, I'm like, this healing is garbage. I can't really use it. But it's actually pretty good. Each crux reduces the cost of this ability, and it heals quickly. So how I was able to survive in PvP is just have a lot of heals versus like something like Honor the Dead just burst me up for 10,000 or so. This will heal you over a small duration pretty quickly. And if you combine it with the tank skill line here and use this skill, Rune Guard of Freedom, you actually have really good survivability. The downside of the survivability in the class is currently that, well, you don't have a whole lot of on-demand while doing damage healing. You don't have a crit sword from the sword. You don't have a Hungry Scythe for the Necro. you don't have a Swallow Soul per se from the Nightblade. So you have to strap on a couple heals if you don't have Pale Order. Now, the developer is aware of this. None of this information is final, so just be aware. What people are really excited about is this particular skill here. So you have Restrictive Domain or Zen's Empowering Disc. What this does is gives you a rune to stand in, kind of like a Templar's extended ritual, okay? But when you stand in here, you get Minor Fortitude, Intellect, Endurance, and Minor Courage. This is what a lot of people use Yalakrins in Trials, and could actually change Trials forever if this goes live. And this effect clings to you and your allies for up to 7 seconds after leaving. So this particular skill here is an absolute game changer, and even solo PvE, getting access to Minor Courage and or a heal, and then being able to move out of the area and come back, makes the Arcanist as a support PvP, PvE, absolute game changer. Minor Courage is huge. The Arcanist also has a heal, which is really interesting. Also, you have to aim the heal, just like you do the damage dealing ability. So this is the healing aim. Now, or look at it, you have to actually aim it. So it's gonna be kind of weird for healers to actually kind of focus on where they are and have this long-lasting channel. So it'll be really important for you to get your buffs up if you're gonna be using this, but you have really nice built-in Zen's Empowering Disc here. In the Apocryphal Gate, this is currently bugged out, so all of our group members can't go through this. This is the group, kind of transit thing that people are freaking out about being so strong, but it's actually not that strong because you put it down on the ground, you have to go through it. Right now, there's one morph that gives a synergy where other people in your group can use it. It's a 20-second cooldown to use a synergy. Currently, it's bugged, so we tried to test it in a trial. Didn't seem to be that strong because 1, you have to cast it. 2, you have to place it on the ground. 3, you have to walk back into it. And you see that first ability on my bar? It's on cooldown. So I can't like recast it. Sure, I can go to the portal back and forth forever, but it's only 15 meters, right? So how good is this ability? Doesn't seem to be that strong to me. So, but we'll test it out once it gets unbugged and we get it fixed. Another thing to be aware of not only having Minor Courage built into your class kit, but Minor Evasion. So this is kind of how you get Minor Evasion, your group buff that you bring to a trial or dungeon that's unique to the class is this specific Minor Evasion buff here. So combine this Minor Evasion buff that you get access to was something that you can put on the ground to give everyone Minor Courage. Everyone's going to want the Arcanist in here because of that. They didn't create necessarily a brand new unique buff like the Necromancer with Major Vulnerability, but this is kind of giving you a glimpse of what would be to come. Now, a couple gear sets that you want to be aware of that will be kind of popular, I would imagine, at first. Deadly Strike's what I used in PvE. This is kind of used on Templars, but it increases the damage of your damage over time and channel abilities by 15%. Even the Tentacle is 0.3 second channel. The Beam that you're using all the time is a channel. My damage ramped up. If you're using the channel, and that's the huge beam here called Fate Carb or whatever morph you have. Just realize the traditional sets that people use that require you to light attack weave are not going to be that impactful, right? So Zons, what do you need to do with it? You need to deal critical damage with light or heavy attack. Well, if you're sitting in a channel for 5.5 seconds, 4.4 seconds, what are the opportunities you're going to have to light attack, right? Not very many. Same with Reliquants. Everyone loves Reliquants, right? You have to light and heavy attack, and those stacks fall off after 5 seconds. Well, I'm at a 5.5 second channel. How good is the set? Not that good, right? So don't overthink it. Sets like Deadly Strikes, absolutely fantastic. Another set that we used to use, that I use on the Monster Helm and proc very easy with the beam, is Valken Scoria. Believe it or not, it's fantastic. And then on the body sets, I've used like Perfected Coral Riptide and went back to a 2H on my back bar and kind of tanked my resources because you are low resources. There are some new Mythics and Trials gears out, so we'll have to test these out. One specifically just gives you 7% damage at all times to monsters. This one here, and then if you bash and interrupt, another 7%. Absolutely fantastic solo. But we'll see what the parsing setups have. There's some ones that you can't move and do well also. But the Whirl Adept, Reliquins, other ones, if you're going to use a channel, didn't seem to be that effective. Realize as a PvD DPS in this particular build, you don't necessarily have to use Fate Carver, which is the long-lasting beam. But what you need to do is find a way to build and consume cruxes all the time, because all of your passes are built off of this. So you want to constantly be building up and consuming cruxes to proc all these important passives. And then one way you can do it if you don't like using this is putting another dot there or some other ability, and then constantly using this Tentacular Dread to dump your cruxes more frequently. This is a quick glimpse in kind of what I would use and how I would be playing this build. Check the links in the description below for a deeper dive on each individual class. As the PTS unfolds, I'll be updating my websites on tanks, healers, DPS, solo, group, and PvP, but it's going to take some time. Remember, this comes out in June 5th, and also there's going to be a PTS cycle, so there's going to be some ups and downs to finally tune this along with the new gear sets. But when June 5th rocks, Deltiasgaming.com will 100% have these builds locked and loaded and actually tested. Now, without further ado, let me show you the final boss of Vateshran Hollow, how this actually looks gameplay-wise as a solo DPS. You're going to be shocked. It's awesome. Also, do me a big thumbs up. Hit that thumbs up. Leave me a comment and check me out on twitch.tv/Deltiasgaming, where my mom claims I'm the best streamer alive.